Hello, jewelry lover. My name is Bella Naiman, and I'm the founder of New York City Jewelry Week. Welcome to the virtual program for NYCJW25. The theme for this year's 8th edition of New York City Jewelry Week is Art Worn, focusing on artistry in jewelry and how artistic intent informs the creation of adornment. We hope that you enjoy the programs that we have carefully put together for you. While this program is not live, we do welcome your feedback. So enjoy the program. Don't forget to sign up for our mailing list. Follow us on Instagram at NYC Jewelry Week, and hope to see you in person in 2026.
Welcome to our talk, Jewels on Paper, Secrets of Creation. I'd like to introduce you to my speaker, Sandra Hindman. She's the founder and president of the gallery Les Enluminures, with spaces in Paris, Chicago, and New York, and it was founded in 1991. As a former professor, she's the author and editor of more than a dozen scholarly books on medieval manuscripts and historic jewelry. She also supervises the publishing arm of Les Enluminures, which has to date published more than 60 catalogues. And last year she was named Chevalière of the Order of Arts and Lettres by the French government, a great honor. And it's a great honor to share this talk with you, Sandra.
And with you too, Beatriz. So I would like to introduce my colleague, Beatriz Chadour-Sampson, who is an international jewelry historian, author, and lecturer. Her publications, which are many, range from the classical world to the present day and include her doctoral thesis on the Italian goldsmith Antonio Gentili da Faenza, the jewelry collection of the Museum for Angewandte Kunst in Cologne, and the Alice and Louis Koch collection in Zurich. She was the consultant curator for the redesigning of the wonderful William and Judith Bollinger Jewelry Gallery at the Victoria and Albert Museum, which many of you probably have visited, and the guest curator of its Pearls exhibition. She curated the permanent display of the Alice and Louis Koch collection in the Swiss National Museum in Zurich and the Gobelin Gem Museum in Lucerne. It's been a great honor to be associated with Beatriz over these many years, and she is here also as the author, the primary author with Gaia Grizzi of our newest publication and exhibition, Jewels on Paper, Secrets of Creation. Beatriz, let's go.
Yeah, let's get started.
Okay.
Here's the cover of the book on the left, Jewels on Paper, Secrets of Creation. And on the right, well, that's something for you to talk about.
On the right, we have the invitation to the exhibition which took place in Paris of the Jewels on Paper. And here on the next screen is a collage of many of the different works that are in this catalog, which we'll talk about in greater detail. And you can see actually how the exhibition is installed in the next screen in our gallery in the Palais Royal in Paris, our new gallery in a very beautiful space. We've been able to suspend some of the drawings on magnets along the wall. You see on the left, some of the drawings are framed on the wall. And in the next slide,
this is my favorite.
Yes, because we were able to recreate in this wonderful table loaned by Patrick Fortin Gallery in Paris. We were able to sort of recreate a little area where presumably a jeweler, a designer, a draftsman would work on his drawings with a wooden model to actually suspend real necklaces or pendants, and some of the drawings there in the background. I'd like to talk just a little about what the book entails, and then we will go into the actual talk, which will be divided into a look at each of the items in the catalog. And then the first will be the historical background of jewelry drawings. The second, the various objects and books in the catalog. And the third, a brief talk about other collections. And then a what's coming next. So the book and catalog has a total of 2,750 drawings in 11 different items. The items are booklets, small albums, as well as boxed sets of individual drawings, leaf by leaf. It may seem odd. We are, of course, historic jewelry dealers in Paris, but many of you probably know that I'm also a book dealer and an art historian. So building this collection, which I did over about 10 years, really brings together my interests in books and manuscripts and my interest in historic jewelry. So I put this together as a kind of research tool, which we then did research on. And as I said, over 10 years, and the albums and drawings go from about the 1770s to the 1960s, which is a fairly large range of time. They include known firms, unknown firms as well, ideal for further research. And one of the most interesting things is they show all these various functions that drawings, secrets of creation, could have. That is presentation copies for clients, preparatory studies done by the jewelers themselves, as well as archives for different firms, sometimes firms that are no longer in existence. And in some cases, these uses are blurred. So I think I will turn now to the first section on the historical background of jewelry drawings, which Beatriz, my colleague, will take up here.
Well, we're talking about the goldsmith in the Middle Ages, Renaissance and Baroque, which is really how drawings were used, how it evolved. And this predates, of course, jewels on paper, which is quite interesting to have a little flashback of the ideas. So here we start with Matthew Paris. He was, in fact, a goldsmith and then became a Benedictine monk. He was a very famous chronicler and illustrator. And fortunately for us, in one of his books, he's got this wonderful page, which is often published, with jewels that probably represent gems that were in the Abbey collection. I find that particularly interesting because sapphires were worn by clerics, and most of the jewels have sapphires, and because it's the heavenly color, blue and divine. Interesting is this other piece here with rubies, pearls, and the sapphire. Rubies and pearls were connected or associated with Christ as symbolic of his blood and purity. And what a wonderful page for the jewelry historian. You've got a stirrup ring here, two types. And at Les Enluminures, if you're tempted, I would like a ring. The stirrup ring, I believe, is still on offer. Very interesting, late 13th to 14th century stirrup ring of that period, same period of Matthew Paris. But I think, Sandra, you would probably like to talk about the Hours of Johannes Maclis, because it's at Les Enluminures, and you've studied it from page to page, image to image.
Yes, I think these drawings of jewelry in medieval manuscripts, especially in the 15th century, what's called trompe-l'oeil illustration, are very interesting. I mean, obviously they are not studies by jewelers to make jewelry. They're kind of recordings of jewels that might have been in the particular owner's collection. They're called trompe-l'oeil, and you can see that they sit on the page as though they were actually on the page. Here are two examples among many, many. The Hours of Johannes necklace, which is on the left, and the Da Costa Hours in the Morgan Library, which is on the right. On the right, you see a cusped ring in the lower right corner of the margin. And we've included here a cusped ring from the Joannès collection that is exactly the same type and exactly the same date, around 1500, as these cusped rings. Jewelry such as this is not often dated, and so these manuscripts, which are dated, help us provide dates for different types of jewelry. I especially like the left-hand slide. We know that this manuscript was made for a nun. And here is this flight. So she's traveling somewhere. That is, it's not she, it's the Virgin Mary who's traveling on the flight into Egypt. And my hypothesis, it may not be true, is that as a nun, she had to leave behind her, precious collection. And she had her jewelry represented on the page as a reminder when she prayed in her book in the nunnery that she could see these precious possessions. The A is probably not her name, but an A for Ave, Ave Maria.
I think that's fascinating. I like the theory. We as jewelry historians have to come up with theories, as long as you mention it is a theory and not fact. And I was fascinated by the Costa hours because you've got rosaries, and I went even a little bit deeper into the flowers that are beautiful flower used along the borders. And often the flower is symbolic of Christ or whatever. And it's interesting that you have jewels of Christ with the IHS pendant, for example, and you've got lots of pearls, which are, of course, associated with Christ. So there's a lot more symbolism, so we can maybe even fantasize more about these jewels. But shall we go on to these are all jewels that we are probably are documenting existing jewels, but let's move on to Martin Schongauer. These are now designs, and this is interesting because, Sandra, I know we talked about function, and this comes up also in these very early designs, prints. Here we have a bishop's crozier and an incense burner. It's not jewelry, but we have to remember the goldsmiths were also, they made the large scale pieces as well as jewelry. And Schongauer was a very famous painter and engraver, and he was the son of a goldsmith. And here, these elements of the Virgin Mary seated, we find on his paintings jewels, but also this motif on devotional jewels. So not only did he do the crozier and the incense burner. Then we come to Albrecht Dürer, where he's considered as one of the most important German artists of the Renaissance period. He lived in Nuremberg, famous painter, but also printmaker. And he was a goldsmith as well as his father. And here you see, very different to the right, he's actually it's a print, but he's drawn here the dolphins and the cornucopia. It's very sort of in the moment, his creative mind, you can see working. Albrecht Altdorfer, he really made designs for all kinds of objects, but here we have a pomander, and in the pure Renaissance style of the time. And let's move on. These were exceedingly important. We've got Holbein, Hans Holbein, maybe to you known as a painter for the royal family in Britain. He made a lot of portraits. And here we have of the 16th century, his drawings. There's a jewelry book that exists in the British Museum collection, and there are lots of drawings. Do look at the website, you'll find plenty more. And these were probably a book with designs for goldsmiths and jewelers to use, as was the case in very often there were artists who made designs for jewelers.
And I just add, Beatrix, of course, yes. You all know that Holbein also paints portraits of important dignitaries, often wearing jewelry. And the fact that these portraits show jewels that are very true to life relates to his interest in and knowledge of jewelry shown in these drawings.
Absolutely, yes. And not only that, he was one of the most copied, his designs were one of the most copied during the 19th century. Albrecht Dürer and certainly Holbein, the jewelers who made revival jewelries, historical revival jewelry. Holbein was certainly in Switzerland, Germany, and Austria the one they copied. He was very popular. And in England, you mentioned the portraits. That started the Holbeinesque style in England of using enamel frames with Holbein ornaments. So a very interesting aspect of jewelry in many ways. On the left, we have here Daniel Mignot, a pendant with the cardinal virtue fortitude, and lots of what I find interesting. There's so many rings to catalogue for Les Enluminures. Look at all these lovely drawings here of the sides of a ring and so on. Very, very interesting, and helps us also date it, pieces. But it's an interesting, Mignot came from France. He was a Huguenot and fled to Augsburg in Germany, but he was not allowed to make jewelry as a goldsmith. So he turned to designing jewelries, fortunately for us, because we have all his wonderful designs. His jewels probably would have been melted down. Virgil Solis came from Nuremberg, and he was a book illustrator, printmaker, and he made a vast amount of ornamental prints. Also for furniture, architecture, they were used. And here, and occasionally the whole jewel. And here we have a Renaissance pendant from the front with the cabochon stone and the enameled back, as we can imagine it.
And I know we've talked, Beatriz, about localizing jewelry, and people are often puzzled by why we can't say that something is Germany or France. But the very fact that there are so many prints that would have circulated throughout Europe and goldsmiths themselves moved shows that some of these designs are really universal.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I could even trace back some of the designs to the Philippines, where Chinese craftsmen were making jewelry for the Spaniards that was sold in Europe. So we're very wide with Western Europe, but can you imagine, we can almost say international. No, I'm glad you brought that up. That is really important. Yes, Western Europe, you'll find it in most museums. Now we come to something a little different. This is an inventory. This is not a drawing of an artist for a jeweler. This is an artist called Hans Mielich. He was commissioned to paint this inventory of jewels that belonged to Duke Albrecht V and his wife, Duchess Anna Bavaria. And it's called the Kleinodienbuch, and on the you can find all the drawings. There are plenty of them. There's at least 70 of them, and you can see all the details, the bracelets worn in pairs, and the actual types of jewels that were worn at the time. Often these were made in at the court of Munich or in Italy, but there are also jewels in the inventory that came from India. Would you believe it? And here you see, we can also make other observations that diamonds appear in black because they had a certain bitumen. We find that on as a background to the stone. It was not about sparkle in those days. There's so many things we can learn from this inventory. But let's move to the Arnold Lulls album at the Victorian Album Museum. Rather puzzling, because it's been a discussion point over many years. Lulls was a Flemish goldsmith. He came from Antwerp. He worked at the court of James I of England and Queen Anne of Denmark, who was the wife. And it's the more you look at it, you realize that there are several hands. So what is this book about? Well, it's most likely to belong to Arnold Lulls, but it has a compilation of pieces that were made by probably 3 to 4 artists. And those of you who know the Cheapside hoard, you'll recognize this type of jewel with the grapes that exist in either emeralds or in amethyst in the Cheapside hoard in the Museum of London. And then we come to the 17th century. Gilles Légaré, he worked for Louis at the court of Louis XIV. We make certain observations. His drawings are very much about, well, botanical themes that were, botany was an important theme at the time. And it was also the French style of enamels. And here we can study the outline drawings of the jewels that were then enameled. And then it goes a bit further. We'll get to the jewels on paper very shortly. Please be patient. We come now, François Lefebvre. This is an interesting because when you're looking at these drawings, you can see that it was a fashion for pearls and diamonds. And the drawings allow you to either visualize things with diamonds or pearls. And also the drawings are more about making advertising, PR for the actual client, rather than being design books for the jeweler. This is more presentation of the jewels to the client. This becomes now, we come to Jean Quien, and here he was a jeweler in London in 1710, and this is certainly all about advertising his goods. There are more drawings, and the collection is in the Victoria and Albert Museum. There are more, but this is his visiting card, so to speak. But shall we move on now to
Actually, if I could just say, Beatrix, our collection starts up where Beatrix's introduction here is just left off. I would have loved to have had Holbein drawings in my among my 11 examples, but alas, I don't think I've ever seen a Holbein drawing of jewelry on the market. So most of the examples Beatriz showed you are very rare and are now in museums. We start, Beatrix, here in the 1770s with the book you're going to talk about.
With 250 designs. Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we look at these ring designs. I know from the Alison Louis Koch collection, we've got quite a few rings from this period. These neoclassical rings, and what a pleasure to find these designs, the drawings for some of them. And this is a selection. It looks very French in style, what you're seeing here. And themes, you've got the flaming hearts on an altar of love. You've got mourning jewels here with an urn. And some of these can be for love or your initial S. A fascinating selection of rings of the neoclassical period, which they haven't survived all that well, some of these rings. The Koch collection has probably one of the largest of that period. But let's get to the mystery of this book. This is all jewelry for the hair, for the head. When we look at further drawings from this album, you'll see the style is very French. So it's very, when you start trying to, where does this album come from? Then you start to realize when you look at certain details, these are what are called in the Netherlands front needles. And just so that you see how they were worn, this is Antje Hendricks, a little bit later in the 19th century. These front needles were worn here across the forehead. This makes the album definitely from as coming from the Netherlands. And just to show you what in England or France would have been worn in the hair on the head are these arrows, diamond-studded arrows. So you have French versus the Netherlands, but the book is definitely from the Netherlands. And here these earrings are the more 18th century chandelier style. And these that were worn, you can see these loops, they were worn on ribbons that were attached to the hair. And look at these, the absolute amazing array of designs here. It excites me, Sandra.
And Beatrix, do you consider this an album that's like an inventory or a presentation for clients? They're all numbered. What do you think it functions as?
It's difficult to say with this, but I think it's probably showing, representing the repertoire of a jeweler, what he had what he could make, because the variety is so amazing. Also, even if you look at these two here, they're very similar, but they're large and small and so on. So I think it is to present to clients and to choose what they would like, rather than something documented, which we'll see later, of pieces that are already made or shown to the client and chosen. And then we have these very 18th century aigrettes, and again a bit of love. The heart with the arrows, and the harp is also a symbol of love. And we've got all kinds of flowers. This is butterflies, also a symbol of love. Certainly the French fashion that was en vogue in Paris. But we know that, as you said, Western Europe, a lot of the fashions were throughout Europe, certainly in the 18th and 19th, early 19th century. And then we move on to something quite different, but the function is similar. This is a book of designs for gemstone and paste jewelry by G&J Kemp. With the help of Goldsmiths Company in London, I was able to find out who that was. George and James Kemp. And we know the date has to be after 1821, because James was then became a goldsmith, registered at the Goldsmiths Company, and they had their shop in Fetter Lane. So the drawings are about 1622-ish. What is interesting here, this is the Georgian period, and it was also a period where it was not about diamonds, it was all about colored stones. Less expensive, but beautiful colors, if it was pink, blue, or whatever the colors were, in paste or as gemstones. Paste was worn also by Marie Antoinette in the 18th century, so it was nothing less. Gemstones were really very socially accepted, more than that. And here we have crosses. I'll talk about, we have pendants or brooches. And here we have earrings. Now, what is all this about? What happens is, this is a book that the jeweler would present. And I think also in that period, jewelers had pieces of jewelry, sort of parts of jewelry in their drawers. And they would show the client and say, would you like an earring, or would you like a tiara, or would you like something, a set of jewels? And they could choose within this book the design and then what they would like to have with it. And then they would choose the color of the stones with the client. That's why you have all these outline drawings. Of course, I can't not show the tiaras. And these certainly weren't about diamonds. This is about colored stones, which was very fashionable, as we know, in the Georgian period.
And the firm doesn't exist any longer.
No. We only have very, very short. We're lucky to find that registration in the Goldsmiths Company.
Right.
No further information how long or anything like that. So that was already good, at least to be able to date it. And it makes sense, the date, also for the style of jewels and the fashions of setting your own colored stones. Now, this is one of your favorites, I think, Sandra, Alfred Schaller. Alfred Schaller in Munich. Unfortunately, we were unable to find out who Alfred Schaller is. His name is signed in the book, and it's also 1923 stated. So that we have a date. The jewelry that's shown, well, there are 1,188 drawings. And they are date probably from the 1880s onwards to, well, 1923. And some of the pieces of jewelry I'll be showing you, they also could have come from travels. But let's get into the pictures. Certainly around 1900, 1910, you've got the Belle Epoque. We'll come to the conclusion maybe at the end, Sandra, should we?
Sure, yes.
So we've got Belle Epoque pieces, very dainty pieces of that period. And here we've got fabulous tiara, maybe a little bit later, but it's certainly very Belle Epoque in its style up to about 1910. Then we have this sort of revivalist type of neck piece, a rather unusual design. Cameos that could be Renaissance, miniature paintings, and pendants that were very fashionable in that period in the 19th century as well as earlier. This looks like definitely a revival piece, but could almost be Greek. Here we have neoclassical rings, so we're moving in all different centuries. And that certainly was on one of the travels to India, these Kundan technique rubies set. There's certainly pieces that were recorded after travel. And here we have late in the 1880s, 90s, very, very fashionable high Victorian bangles. So, Sandra, what is the mystery behind this?
So they're all by the same hand, we think. Here are the rings as well. And we believe it is signed Albert Schaller and Munich too. We believe it's a kind of record of this firm. And unfortunately, we don't know more about the firm, of the jewels that they had from maybe the beginning to the end. And it's very hard to see on the screen, but many of them have the weights, the identification of the stone, the sizes.
Is here also, here in pencil on the sides.
Right.
I chose the rings because they have the most annotations.
Yeah, and again, written in the same hand. So that supports the idea that it's a kind of inventory. Wouldn't you agree, Beatrix? Isn't this?
I think absolutely. And also records of somebody who's been seeing things on travels and also recording what they've seen as well.
Yeah, it's a fascinating work.
So now we come to something a little different. It's a sketchbook of designs for dress accessories with 278 sketches from about the 1880s to 1900. This is one that I get quite excited about. I think this must be an artist who's making designs for a jeweler. It's all from the same hand. And I think fascinating is the way the basic designs, they play around with different motifs and similar shapes, which becomes more evident. These are hair combs. And these roundels could either be brooches or designs for brooches or buttons even. This is one that this is where you see he plays around with ornamental ideas, and here he includes another bird. And their little heads, it's Medusa heads and cupids and all kinds of ornamental flowers and butterflies. Full of imagination of an artist who is designing for a jeweler. That's my theory.
But perhaps put together later into an album, because of course the paper, we can see on the example on the right, different types of paper are used, some different coloring.
Yes, they're sort of stuck in an album, aren't they?
Right, yeah.
Now we come to the very important thing. Oh, when I see spelling. Absolutely. And this is fascinating because Jules Chadel, he worked in Paris and he was an artist and he had many professions, but he worked for Georges Le Turc from 1894 to 1904, a famous jeweler in Paris, and was making designs for jewelry. We know also he worked for Boucheron and Maison Veuve. But what was not known until these drawings appeared is that he also worked for Georges Fouquet, which I'll show in a moment. But here, just to show you, it's very sketchy. You've got three nymphs here, and here you've got a lizard and floral decorations. But it's very sketchy. And that now becomes clear why Fouquet used the sketch by Chadel to make this magnificent jewel now in the Arikawa Albert Art Jewelry Collection in Tokyo. And the sketch here shows a head but in Chadel, and these blue areas probably would have been plique jour enamel and coral. It's a sea nymph. Now, Sandra, this is your favorite.
Well, I love it that, there are changes in the actual jewel. First of all, it's rare to find the actual jewel that goes with the drawing. So we were delighted when our colleague, Gaia Grizzi, discovered this one. But look at how, a sea nymph, well, coral goes so well with the idea of a sea nymph. But the jeweler has changed that into these beautiful emeralds and diamonds over here. Yeah, drawing for a jeweler, and then the jeweler has his own ideas as well.
He's got the seaweed, I would call that. The emeralds represent seaweed, and the opals here, water, the waves in the water.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
But what a find, and also to know that he worked for Fouquet, which was unknown before. There's not much information on him, but we do know who he worked for. The next album is 20 designs from 1890 to 1920, what I call, well, it's coined, the term garland style was coined by Cartier much later than the actual designs were made, but I find these very interesting. To me, talking about function, these are a record of what a jeweler made. It's kept, the images are kept of pieces that are made rather than creations that are in the making. Here we have diamonds with rubies and these very typical Belle Epoque sort of style pieces. And I will talk about the idea of using platinum, because these are very, very fine lines, all diamonds, just a touch of rubies. Mainly it's all diamond jewelry. And if you see this, the bows here, it's very, very much going back to the Louis XVI style, which was typical during the 1900s. It was not all about Art Nouveau jewelry, it was also the Belle Epoque and what followed afterwards. And I think the next one is fascinating, because if you see this sort of lacework or the honeycomb here and the lacework here, well, this is typical jewelry of the time when you used platinum and diamond, because this was a period when platinum was increasingly being used by jewelers, and it had this, platinum is very hard, so you can make these very, very fine settings, and only through platinum and its fineness can you create such lace-like patterns, or even the honeycomb here and the wheat sheaf here. It's absolutely only possible at the time when you started using platinum. And I think there's a technical thing that you would like to add, which you're the expert.
I'm hardly the expert on this. I think it's really puzzling. This is the only set of these 11 albums and books where the drawings are on rhodoid, which is a kind of photographic paper. And it's very hard to see in this slide, but the photographic paper then has a transparency, and you can take it out of these little settings and look at it through the light too.
There you can see the lace even better.
Yes, yes.
So now we move on to a book of rings with 286 designs, probably German, from the 1920s to the 1930s, characteristically German because it was a time of economic difficulties, and the designs were really very plain at the time. The use was more also not of very precious rubies and sapphires. It was all about the color of stones, and aquamarines were used a lot, all different less precious choice of gemstones. And here we have this is definitely looks like a book of a manufacturer, I would even say. And here we have simple gold signet rings that are ready to either put your heraldry in engraved, or have your initials engraved on the bezel. This to me is a book of designs that are being made by a manufacturer in Germany. There were 3 centers, but it could be any town in Germany. But we do know that Hanau, Pforzheim, and Schwäbisch Gmünd. But we weren't able to, unfortunately, find where exactly it came from.
Rich for further research.
That's it. That's it. You got it in a nutshell. And now we come to drawings from a jeweler, probably France. Again, the period of 20s and 30s, quite an interesting contrast. And 22 drawings. Well, what a contrast in the 20s and 30s. Here we have, definitely from one hand, a jeweler who is designing, or a designer in a jeweler's shop, who's designing for the company. And here we see different, the festoons here, and here I can't imagine what the blue is, beads of blue or sapphires or whatever, but you can see the same design is repeated here with pearls. So the person designing is trying to think of, different ways of using these similar designs. And you very lightly see that there's a body here in silhouette, which is important. He's obviously also thinking of how it's worn on the body. And here looks similar to the previous one, but again, a third variation of a similar neck piece. And here the earring and the ear shown to see how it shows. And beautiful emeralds and diamonds, a very rich choice of gemstones. Certainly, it was a time also in the 20s and 30s when one made jewelry of varying diamond cuts, which was popular. Well, I think he's achieved that in this bracelet. And also in here, you've got baguette cut, you've got the brilliant cut, you've got navette cut, sort of ship-like ones. And you've got a whole selection of diamond cuts, and that was very fashionable at the time. Very much reflected in these three drawings, and there are more, of course. But this gives you a little idea of the selection. Do you want some?
No, I think these drawings are very beautiful, and they're quite large.
This shows exactly how he's thinking. Do I use one pendant or two? Yes. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say these are quite beautiful. Not only the shadowing with different body parts, but also they're quite large and very skillfully drawn.
And of course, the transition from white gold or platinum to yellow gold by the late 30s, when economic situation became more difficult. There suddenly is a taste for yellow gold jewelry, which he also documents in his drawings.
And even here, artistically, note that he's choosing a different, we're saying he, but it might have been a she. He's chosen a different paper for the yellow gold, a kind of creamy yellow, orange, golden paper instead of a grayish paper. So this is really a jeweler artist doing these drawings.
Then we come to Jules Fontaine. He came from Bruges in Belgium, and he studied there, he taught there, and he was an artist. He made all kinds of caricatures, sketches, and this is an unusual album with a few jewels, which here these could be, these are probably thought to be used as pendants. I've enlarged this one here because you see the fineness of how the cabochon stones are, the concept of it, and these beautiful animals, the fish, the frog, and the lizard. And then he also designed this Egyptian influence, 1920s, the Egyptian influence. Here are some interesting pendants with scarabs, and very much in the arts and crafts design, the spoons. There's also a chalice, and there are lots of sketches of people in this album. And there was a retrospective exhibition in 1973 in the Groningen Museum in Bruges, and I'm sure they would have loved to have had this album there because it was non-existent at the time for the exhibition.
And I think that it is the only record of his work really as a jeweler. The album had many of the exhibition had many other things by him, but they didn't have a kind of pictorial record of jewelry. He was a teacher too. So yes, this is an interesting addition to his repertoire.
And jewels on paper.
Yes, exactly.
Here we have designs again from a jeweler's workshop. I think this is really from a jeweler's workshop, what they've in the 40s and 50s, what they made. These are records. They could be also have shown to clients to exemplify what they can make. These seem to me more like finished jewels. Here we have the yellow gold with emeralds, typical of that period, with the yellow gold, and this very sort of nature, a very sort of positive looking outlook that nature gives. And here we have, this is butterflies and birds. This is a fabulous piece, a ring. You see this sort of early design, and this is more of the 1950s where more color comes in and more exuberance. And this is certainly exuberance at its highest because it's more than a bird. It's a big amethyst with lots of diamonds around it.
And note the shading again. This only happens in the 20th, sort of from the mid 20th century on, or the third decade, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And of course, then the transition to more expensive pieces made of densely studded with diamonds. And here we have these little cone-shaped sapphires. And here, these are flowers. This is so typical of that period. It is in white gold with diamonds and emeralds, but you have these little tiny blossoms or this very articulate shape, very sort of movement in it. And he even gives the feeling of movement in the dashes here. Now, another designer with 330 designs. From the 50s to 70s. This is an absolutely amazing collection of drawings. This is most likely to have been one person who designed for multiple jewelry houses. And here we have this, these are designs for production. And here we have the same ring design, but with 3 different variations and different prices and measurements. So this is typically for the client to decide, do you want 1, 2, or 3? Then we come here. This is a very interesting page that we have because it's a piece that it's a maquette was made for Van Cleef and Arpels in Paris. So it's definitely French, a lot of French annotations. So it's definitely a designer who was French and worked for also major houses like Van Cleef and Arpels. You have further annotations here.
Sometimes with the client's name, right?
I'm not so sure that they have the client's name on here, but they're usually abbreviations, which we can't always tell. Don't forget, it's jeweler's discretion who gets the piece. And here we have 3 earrings and with emeralds. What a wonderful, he certainly had the eye of a creator, very imaginative of how you can use an emerald from cabochon to the emerald cut. And here very sort of simple, and here very ornate. And then he also made designs, as we found through these 2 drawings, Aspreys of London. And Marsa, I'm assuming, is the name of the collection, because it also appears on this drawing, Marsa. So this must be the name of the collection. And you have with turquoise and amethyst and diamonds. There is another leaf in the collection which doesn't have the name Asprey, but shows a variation of this neck piece with corals, pink coral. And turquoise, so definitely, and a ring which also probably belonged. So these 2 we can attribute to Asprey's designs for Asprey's. The designer also was very avant-garde, and this is typically 70s with the torque and the interchangeable pendant. I'm not saying this pendant was meant for there, but just to give you the idea, this is absolute modernism of the 70s. very almost poppy op art. And here, this is a very, this is probably a ship, and they're very interesting, and especially when you look at his rings, an incredible selection of rings. Here we have diamond rings, emeralds, sapphires, emeralds. Absolutely amazing how the foliage swings around, or here you have these little studs coming out here, and then the cross shape with the two colors. Really very much. These are avant-garde in a way, but not quite as the next. This is high-end avant-garde, and this is coming to a slightly different sort of style, with the lapis disc here and the diamonds and the square-shaped ring. That's quite unique at the time, for that time. And here, this is probably onyx and crystal, and this is a piece that could have been for Asprey's, and you have a big diamond with lots of turquoise on the side, very modern in its style. And we have come to the end of Jewels on Paper. Sandra,
we end in the 1970s, and you've just seen a small selection of the 2,750 drawings that comprise the collection. Some of the drawings are little tiny ones, as you've seen, the albums where individual rings are inserted into little pictorial spaces. We wanted to talk very briefly now just about the other kind of centers for research. A collection like we've put together deserves much further research, and there are other collections Beatrix mentioned at the beginning in the British Museum and the Victoria and Albert Museum. Their collections, here's just a short list, in the Rijksmuseum in Berlin. The Petit Palais in Paris just did a wonderful exhibit of which there's an excellent catalog called Secrets of Creation, I think, in French. And it was 3-4 huge rooms, and they found many of the jewels that actually go with the drawings that they exhibited. Rhode Island School of Design, the Rownard Library at Dartmouth, the Albertina. There are really large collections that are, for the most part, unknown and not very well studied. So this is really an upcoming field. I think that the Petit Palais show with a magazine of the Beaux-Arts that accompanied it with many articles is an impetus to further research. And we believe that our collection too, we're hoping that it may go to an institution or to institutions where it can be with other material that it's related to and can be studied. Beatrix has mentioned that, of course, drawings, one of the reasons they're so unknown is unless they're digitized, there are exhibition concerns, works of art on paper, not on permanent display anywhere. So that's a reason they're unknown too, or relatively unknown. Do you want to add something to this very brief look at other institutions and the idea that this is material of wonderful potential for research?
Well, it's so important. We as jewelry historians, we can't study these documents enough, because they help us attribute pieces, and such collections and drawings and prints are hugely important for the jewelry historian. We have to study them all the time. So
Right.
always happy if it's digitized somewhere or published. There are some books that are very sort of older publications where you can find it, but certainly is a field to certainly further research, absolutely, and find the matching jewels.
Yes, find the matching jewels, find the firms that manufactured them, the jewelers who drew the drawings, the inner workings of a shop. Anyway, all of these things can be pursued further.
And of course, what we haven't mentioned is, we've mentioned a lot of museums, but what we haven't mentioned is, of course, the big maison, the jewelry houses if it's London or Paris or Berlin or whatever, they have their own archives, and increasingly they are, some are very old archives, but others are trying to collect more and more information on their houses. So apart from all the museums we've listed, it's the maisons themselves, the jewelers, who have their own archives.
So we welcome this opportunity to present our material for you. And we want to include, just by saying that during Jewelry Week, when this will be broadcast, Les Enluminures is committed to jewelry, actual jewelry, drawings of jewelry, historic jewelry of all types. And our exhibition, which is up during New York Jewelry Week in the New York Gallery, is called Precious Grotesqueries, the Jewels of William Harper. And here is just a very brief taste of what's to come and what's on display in the exhibition. In fact, William Harper was born in 1944 and is a very, very well-known avant-garde jeweler and a superb enamelist. Has many, many, many different jewels. But I was especially drawn to his work for two aspects of his collection. One, he's very inspired by the Middle Ages. And here are, for example, two pendants of saints. This is the artist as Saint Sebastian on the left, and the artist as the Archangel Michael on the right. He uses mixed media, gold, and as I've said, very, very precious and, extraordinarily well done enamel. Sometimes he even puts his saints in little coffins. And then the second theme that we're pursuing in our exhibition of William Harper is his interest in his inspiration from modern art. The piece on the left is inspired by Cy Twombly's Petals of Fire painting series. And these red petals are just exquisitely invoked in the red enamel that accompanies this brooch that is, I think I might have said pendant for the two saints, but they are actually brooches. And this is a brooch too on the left. So Cy Twombly, Jasper Johns is another influence for him. And then on the right, one of his little caskets, and Joseph Cornell is a further influence. This is a little cask in which is contained a jewel. Sometimes they contain various elements. So please do come see, if you're in New York, please do come see our William Harper show. And just as there is with jewels on paper, there is a little booklet on the exhibition as well. Here are the two publications, left and right. And we thank you very much. And I thank my colleague Beatriz, who has given a wonderful overview of the 11 items. And we thank the New York Jewelry Week team for inviting us to give this presentation. Beatriz.
I hope that all those seeing this presentation will enjoy it and start researching more, and also keeping your drawings. I can really say that I've saved quite a few, because living artist jewelers, they the amount of drawings that disappear, or when one dies, they disappear. Then the widow says, "Oh, that's not worth anything." I also recommend to the living artist jewelers, keep your drawings for the future. It's such an important document, as you can see from our talk.
Thank you very much. Next slide, Beatriz.
No, that's it.
No, we haven't. We have the end.
Really?
Oh. That little butterfly again.
Ah, my apologies.
Well, goodbye, everyone, and enjoy.